Snow buried the mountain roads while the casino lights burned as if nothing was wrong. Beneath the final shuttle, a retired Navy SEAL found a nursing German Shepherd trembling alone. Her collar said Willow, but the 4 puppies she had just delivered were nowhere near her. When she pressed her head into Heath Walker's scarred hand, she asked for something no machine could measure. Their search would uncover an elderly woman trapped in a frozen cabin and residents lost between completed forms. But the hardest truth was not that one cruel person had failed them. It was that everyone had stopped checking. Tell us where you're watching from, share your thoughts, and please like and subscribe to help Seal K 9 Tails reach 1,000 subscribers and keep these stories coming. The first week of Advent came to Juniper Notch beneath a sky so bright with snow that the mountains seemed to be disappearing into their own light. Wind swept sideways across the upper road, lifting loose powder from the shoulders and hurling it against the pines. Their dark branches bent, released, and bent again beneath the storm. Far above town, the Silver Crown Resort glowed red and amber through the weather, its casino windows shining against the white slope like a row of banked coals. From a distance, it looked warm. Up close, the wind found every seam. Heath Walker stood behind the maintenance building with one knee in the snow and both hands inside the open housing of a backup generator. The machine had been making an irregular knocking sound for most of the afternoon, too soft for the resort manager to notice and too persistent for Heath to ignore. He listened with his head slightly tilted. Most people watched machines. Heath listened to them. Bearings complained. Belts whispered before they failed. Loose mounts knocked in patterns. Machines were honest that way. They did not insist they were fine while quietly coming apart. At 46, Heath still carried the compact strength of a man accustomed to hauling weight over bad ground. He stood 6 feet tall, broad across the shoulders, without the swollen bulk of someone who trained for mirrors. His dark chestnut hair was longer than military regulation and silvered sharply at both temples. Wind had pushed the front across his forehead beneath his charcoal cap. A short, neatly kept beard darkened his long, weathered face. Silver threaded the jaw. One eyebrow carried a narrow scar, and his nose leaned slightly left from an old break. Beneath his spruce-colored canvas coat, he wore the combat shirt he still preferred for work, the torso olive drab, the camouflage sleeves worn pale at the elbows, dark horizontal bands circling the upper arms. It was not nostalgia, he told himself. The fabric moved well, that was all. He tightened a bracket, started the generator, and listened again. The knocking stopped. "Congratulations," he muttered. "You've earned the privilege of failing later." No one heard him. That was how most of his jokes survived. The final employee shuttle waited 50 yards away, its engine running and exhaust spreading low over the snow. Through its fogged windows, tired workers sat with collars raised and phones glowing in their hands. They were waiting for the upper road to be cleared before heading down toward town. Heath closed the generator housing and flexed his left hand. A pale burn scar curved near the base of his thumb. The cold always found it first. His cabin stood 4 miles beyond Juniper Notch, where the road narrowed between spruce and aspen. The house still held Laurel in ways Heath refused to inventory. Her blue ceramic mug remained in the cabinet beside his. A wool scarf hung from the hook near the rear door. A cracked clay bowl she had once threatened to throw away sat repaired on the kitchen shelf. He had fixed the bowl. He had not fixed the marriage. Near the end, when Laurel was already ill, and both of them were trying to cross back toward each other, Heath had repaired the porch railing, replaced the water heater, resealed every window, and rebuilt half the kitchen drawers. She had watched him work one evening and said, without anger, "You know, a house can be perfectly maintained and still be lonely." He had understood too late that she was not talking about the house. A metallic scrape pulled him back. Heath looked toward the shuttle. The sound came again, not from the engine, but beneath it. Scratch, pause, scratch. The driver leaned out through the folding door. "You hear something?" Heath was already walking. The shuttle rocked slightly as the wind struck its side. Snow packed around the tires and spun in small white circles beneath the chassis. Heath crouched by the rear wheel, removed one glove, and pressed his bare hand to the metal step. A faint vibration answered, not mechanical, alive. "Cut the engine!" he called. The driver obeyed. The low diesel growl died, leaving only the storm. For several seconds, there was nothing. Then a breath came from beneath the vehicle, shallow, rapid, and strained. Heath lowered himself into the snow and looked under the axle. Two amber eyes stared back. The German Shepherd had wedged herself close to the rear assembly, where the metal blocked some of the wind. Her coat was black and gold, though the wet fur had darkened almost to brown. A thin silver streak ran down the bridge of her nose. Her left ear stood erect. The right was missing a small piece along the outer edge and tilted as she studied him. She did not bare her teeth. She did not crawl toward him either. Heath noticed the details in the order danger had once taught him. Front paws intact, no obvious bleeding, breathing fast, body trembling. Then he saw the loose skin beneath her belly, the swollen mammary glands, and the raw line where a collar strap had been cut. She had recently given birth. There were no puppies. Heath eased one arm forward, palm down against the snow. "Easy." The dog's gaze shifted to his hand. A tarnished oval tag hung from the remaining strip of burgundy collar. It turned once in the wind. "Willow." "You picked a poor parking spot, Willow." Her nostrils widened. She smelled his glove, the oil on his sleeve, the cold leather of his coat. Behind him, the driver asked, "Can you pull her out?" Heath did not look away from the dog. "I could also lose a finger." "Right? Try not to sound hopeful." Heath removed his canvas coat and pushed it slowly beneath the shuttle, making a barrier against the wind. Willow watched the movement, but did not retreat. He placed one corner of the coat near her front paws. She lowered her nose to it. A gust struck the side of the shuttle with a flat boom. Somewhere beyond the parking area, wind tunneled through the pines and found a pitch that did not belong to the mountains. It rose and chopped the air. Rotor blades. For one terrible second, Heath was no longer beneath a shuttle in Colorado. His breath stopped halfway in. The space under the vehicle narrowed. Snow became dust. The generator building vanished behind heat and noise. His left hand pressed harder into the ground, but the ground did not feel certain. He knew where he was. Knowing did not always matter. Then Willow moved, not away from him, toward him. She crawled from beneath the axle, her belly nearly brushing the snow. Heath remained still as she emerged into the storm. She came close enough for him to feel her breath against his wrist. Then she lowered her head and pressed the silver line of her brow into his open palm. The contact was neither affectionate nor submissive. It felt deliberate. A weight, a fact. Here. Heath stared at the wet fur beneath his hand. His thumb rested just behind her damaged ear. Willow did not flinch. The wind continued through the trees, but it became wind again. Heath drew one slow breath, then another. "All right," he whispered. He was not certain which of them he meant. Willow swayed when she tried to stand fully. Heath wrapped the canvas coat around her and lifted only enough to support her weight. She was lighter than she should have been. The shuttle driver opened the maintenance bay while Heath carried her inside. Dr. Paige Larkin arrived 20 minutes later in a mustard-colored parka dusted with snow. She entered with a dark red medical bag in one hand and the brisk expression of someone accustomed to arriving after people had already made a situation worse. At 43, Paige moved with compact efficiency. Her red-brown hair was tied low at the neck, and a single pale streak showed near her left temple. Freckles crossed the bridge of her nose above sharp brown gold eyes. She took one look at Heath, kneeling beside Willow. "You moved her?" "Out from under a shuttle." "That qualifies as a good reason. I'll write it down for the record. You'd spell something wrong out of spite." Paige crouched several feet away and allowed Willow to smell the back of her hand. The dog's right ear tipped outward. She accepted Paige's touch, though her eyes remained fixed on Heath. The examination was quiet. Paige checked Willow's gums, heart rate, paws, abdomen, and temperature. She ran careful fingers along the swollen mammary glands and studied the clipped remains of the burgundy collar. "She gave birth recently," Paige said. "How recently?" 2 days, maybe 3. Heath looked at the dog's empty underside. "Could the puppies be dead?" Paige did not soften the answer. "They could be. They could also be alive, and somewhere else." Willow lifted her head at the change in their voices. Paige gave her warmed fluids beneath the skin and offered a small bowl of water. Willow drank, stopped, and looked toward the closed bay door. "She's dehydrated," Paige continued. "Overexerted. Her milk is coming in, but she hasn't been nursing regularly. If we don't find the puppies, or at least relieve the pressure safely, she could develop mastitis." Heath watched Willow take another mouthful of water. "She ran from somewhere. Or she was separated during transport." Outside, a snowplow crawled across the lot, its amber beacon turning behind the frosted windows. Paige unfolded a thermal blanket in the rear of her vehicle. "I'm taking her to the clinic. She needs warmth, rest, and no heroic mountain expeditions." That last part directed at me? At the only person in the room who treats instructions like personal insults. Before Heath could answer, Willow stood. Her legs trembled, but she crossed the maintenance bay and stopped at the door, her nose pressed against the lower seam. A soft sound gathered in her chest, not a bark, not quite a whine. Heath opened the inner door, but kept the outer one shut. Willow stared through the glass. Beyond the parking area, a narrow service road disappeared into the storm behind a locked barrier. The road climbed toward several maintenance structures that had been shut down before the weather worsened. Willow pulled once toward it. Then she looked back at Heath, not Paige. "Heath?" Paige came to stand beside him. "That doesn't mean you follow her into a blizzard?" "No." "You said that too quickly." Heath took out his phone and called County Dispatch. The connection broke twice before Deputy Simone Avery answered. Her voice came through beneath radio static, controlled and unimpressed. "Heath, if this is about Silver Crown's generator, tell them electricity is a privilege." "It's not the generator." He explained the dog, the evidence of recent birth, and the service road. Simone listened without interruption. She was 49, a county deputy known for arriving slowly enough to understand a scene and quickly enough to prevent someone else from ruining it. When Heath finished, she said, "You're not going up that road alone." "I didn't say I was." "You were thinking in complete sentences." A burst of static cut across the line. Another voice spoke faintly in the dispatch room behind her. Then Simone went silent. "What?" Heath asked. "We just got an old alarm ping from the upper service sector." "Which building?" "Still pulling it." Heath looked through the glass at Willow. The dog had not moved. Simone's voice returned. "Cabin 12, the system shouldn't even have power." Paige closed her medical bag. Less than half an hour later, a tracked rescue vehicle waited beside the maintenance bay. Simone arrived in a dark county coat, snow caught in her short black and silver hair. A patrol technician named Roy Danner drove while she checked maps and radio channels. Willow rode only because Paige insisted she remain in the heated rear compartment. Heath sat beside her, one hand near the repaired strip of burgundy collar, but not touching it. The vehicle climbed slowly through white silence. At the last turn, Willow struggled upright. Through the windshield, cabin 12 appeared as a low shape nearly buried beneath drifting snow. One side of the roof was hidden by a fallen pine. The windows were dark. Willow pressed her nose to the glass. A low, aching sound escaped her. Simone raised one hand for silence. At first, Heath heard only the engine and the storm. Then, from somewhere inside the buried cabin, came 3 faint knocks. A pause, then 2 more. The knocking stopped before Heath reached the door. For a moment, the only sound around cabin 12 was the tracked vehicle idling behind him and snow brushing the timber walls in long, dry strokes. Simone Avery raised a gloved fist, signaling everyone to remain quiet. "County Sheriff's Office," she called. "If you can hear me, knock again." Nothing answered. Heath stood at the edge of the buried porch, studying the structure rather than the silence. The cabin's front door was closed beneath a crust of ice. A narrow electronic lock showed no light. On the north side, the roof disappeared beneath the crown of a fallen pine whose trunk had landed across the rear wall. Willow made a low sound from inside the heated rescue vehicle. Not the aching cry she had given earlier. This was sharper. Impatient. Heath stepped closer to the front window. Frost covered the inside of the glass, but one patch near the lower corner had been wiped clean by a hand. Beyond it, he could make out the edge of a table, several stacked carriers, and a dark shape on the floor near the stove. "There," he said. Simone moved beside him. Her short black and silver hair was damp where snow had melted beneath her cap. She peered through the opening, then took out her body camera and checked that it was recording. "Door was secured from outside," she said for the record. "Possible person inside. Rear exit obstructed by fallen timber. Visible occupant is unresponsive or unable to rise." She looked at Heath. "Can you open it without bringing the frame down?" He examined the hinges. "Yes." That sounded dangerously confident. "It's a door." "You said the same thing about the county garage before it lost half a wall." "The wall had poor judgment," Simone pointed at the lock. "Do the least dramatic version." Heath took a flat pry bar from Roy Danner's rescue kit. The lock had been mounted onto an older wooden frame, expensive hardware attached to timber that had spent 40 winters swelling, drying, and forgiving poor decisions. He placed the bar near the latch and leaned carefully. The wood groaned. Inside, something shifted. "Ma'am?" Simone called. "We're coming in." A faint voice answered, too soft to understand. Heath changed the angle, applied pressure, and the jamb split around the screws. The door opened 6 inches before striking an overturned chair. Cold air rolled out of the cabin. It was colder inside than it was beneath the porch. The room smelled of wet wool, animal bedding, old paper, and the metallic stillness of a stove that had gone dead hours ago. Simone entered first. Heath followed with Roy carrying the emergency heater. The dark shape near the stove moved. An elderly woman lay wrapped in 2 faded transport blankets patterned with black paw prints. She had arranged several empty pet carriers around herself as a barrier against the draft. Her silver-white hair had escaped a small pine-leaf clip and fallen across her round face. Green-framed spectacles sat crooked on her nose. One hand still held the end of a broom handle. "I was knocking with this," she said. Her voice was thin but precise. Simone knelt beside her. "I'm Deputy Avery. What's your name?" "Bernadette Cole." "Do you know where you are?" "Cabin 12, unless someone moved it while I was asleep." Roy let out a breath that might have been relief. Bernadette noticed. "That was humor, young man. You may react accordingly." Roy, who was at least 40, gave a cautious smile and began setting up the heater. Heath crouched near Bernadette's boots. Her right ankle had swollen enough to press against the leather. "What happened?" he asked. "I attempted to move that shelving unit away from the side door." She pointed toward the rear of the cabin. "The shelving unit won." The side exit was blocked from within by a metal rack that had fallen sideways. Beyond the small window in the door, the trunk of the pine rested against the outer steps. Simone touched Bernadette's wrist and checked her breathing. "Any head injury?" "I bruised my dignity, but it was never especially useful." Willow barked once from the vehicle. Bernadette's face changed. The humor left so quickly it seemed to have been a lamp someone switched off. "Willow?" Heath looked toward the door. "You know her?" Bernadette tried to sit up. Pain caught her ankle and folded her back against the blankets. "Where is she?" "Warm," Heath said. Dr. Larkin examined her. "She's dehydrated, but stable." "The puppies?" Heath did not answer immediately. Bernadette read the silence. Her fingers closed around the broom handle. "Oh, no." Simone asked Roy to bring Willow only as far as the doorway and keep the heater running in the vehicle. A minute later, the German shepherd appeared behind him, wrapped in Heath's canvas coat. Willow saw Bernadette. She pulled once, and Roy released enough lead for her to enter. The dog crossed the room without hesitation. She pressed her nose against Bernadette's shoulder, then moved rapidly around the blankets, sniffing the floor, the carriers, the space behind the stove. Bernadette reached for her. "My brave girl." Willow accepted one touch, then returned to searching. She checked every empty carrier. 1, 2, 3, 4. At the last one, she pushed her head inside and stood frozen. The carrier contained only a folded towel. The dog backed out and looked at Bernadette. Something in the old woman's face broke without becoming tears. "I am sorry," she whispered. Heath had seen apologies offered to the dead, to wounded men, to machines that would never run again. This one was different. Bernadette was apologizing to a creature who could not understand paperwork, staffing shortages, insurance dates, or why people separated a mother from her young. Willow lowered herself beside Bernadette's injured leg. She did not forgive her. She stayed. The heater began coughing warm air into the room. As frost loosened on the windows, cabin 12 slowly revealed what it had been. A hand-painted sign above the sink read, "Pine Lantern Pet Circle." Shelves held medicine droppers, brushes, food tins, old leashes, and jars labeled with names rather than ingredients. Photographs covered one wall. Elderly men holding terriers, women in work uniforms kneeling beside cats. A gray-haired couple sharing a chair with a massive St. Bernard. This had never been a formal kennel. It was a place built from favors. Bernadette explained between sips of warm electrolyte solution that Pine Lantern residences had begun as employee housing decades earlier. Over time, cooks, card dealers, housekeepers, groundskeepers, and maintenance workers retired but remained in the small rental cabins. "They built this mountain's hospitality," she said, looking toward the photographs, "then became inconvenient when they grew old enough to need some in return." Silver Crown's parent company had acquired the property the previous spring. Management announced that Pine Lantern required emergency heating repairs and a new avalanche assessment. Both were true. Neither was the whole truth. Heath found a rolled development map beneath several transfer forms. A pale blue outline marked the Pine Lantern slope. Beside it, in clean corporate lettering, were the words, "Proposed North Tower. Winter Poker Expansion." Simone photographed the map without comment. Bernadette watched her. "They told us the new rooms were only a possibility?" "Possibilities usually don't get engineering numbers," Heath said. On the table lay dozens of documents, animal intake cards, resident transport sheets, motel vouchers, handwritten corrections made in different ink. Several lines had been crossed out and rewritten so many times that the paper looked wounded. Heath picked up one transfer schedule. Reduce overnight personnel. Move residents before insurance inspection. Overflow animals to temporary partner facilities. Self-arranged residents. No transport required. Each sentence by itself sounded reasonable. Together they formed something colder than the cabin. No single line said to leave anyone behind. That was the trouble. Neglect rarely wrote its own confession. Bernadette had returned after the evacuation because the number of carriers on the transport sheet did not match the number she had prepared. "I counted 23, she said. The final sheet showed 21. "Why did you come back alone?" Simone asked. "Because everyone else was already on the road, and because I believed I could be in and out before the storm worsened." Heath glanced at her swollen ankle. Bernadette noticed. "Yes, I have since reviewed that decision." She had entered through the side door shortly before a pine fell across it. When she tried to move the shelf blocking the exit, she slipped. Her coat and phone had been left in the evacuation shuttle because she had expected to return within minutes. Later, a security team checked the exterior, saw no vehicle, and secured the front entrance. "They called through the door?" Simone asked. Bernadette looked toward the floor. "I don't know. I may have been unconscious by then." The answer settled heavily in the room. Page's voice came over Heath's radio, asking for an update. When he told her Willow was with Bernadette, the veterinarian instructed them to keep the dog warm, prevent unnecessary movement, and bring both of them down as soon as the route was safe. Bernadette reached for a thick folder held together by an elastic band. "These are Willow's papers." Inside was a veterinary note in Page's handwriting, dated 3 days earlier. Willow had delivered 4 puppies sooner than expected. The instructions were clear. Avoid transport unless medically necessary. Keep mother and litter together. Contact the clinic before sedation. Simone looked at Bernadette. "Was Page called?" "No." "Why not?" "The road team said their schedule had changed. The transport supervisor said the storm window was closing." "And you signed?" Bernadette's hand remained on the folder. "I signed the animal count and permission to transfer them to the temporary shelter listed on the form. I did not sign permission to separate Willow from her puppies." Heath heard the distinction in her voice, not innocence, not yet guilt. A boundary she needed someone else to see. She described the evacuation. The transport company arrived short one heated vehicle. A handler said Willow was too agitated to load safely. Someone produced a mild sedative. Bernadette objected, but the supervisor insisted the puppies would be safer in a heated crate aboard the larger truck. Willow was loaded into a van. The 4 puppies were placed on another vehicle. "What facility?" Heath asked. Bernadette pointed to the form. The destination field had been corrected twice. The final name was unreadable beneath a strip of water damage. "I thought they were going to the same place," she said. "I thought someone else had confirmed it." Heath looked at the rows of initials across the page. Everyone had thought someone else had confirmed it. A county rescue medic met them at the lower emergency station after they descended from cabin 12. Mara Quill arrived wearing a teal winter coat over navy medical scrubs, carrying herself with the unhurried authority of someone who knew haste and panic were not the same thing. At 54, Mara had a broad, steady face and dark hair threaded with gray, tied into a low braid. She listened to Bernadette's lungs, checked her blood pressure, examined the ankle, and asked questions in a voice that made evasions sound more tiring than honesty. Bernadette was mildly hypothermic, dehydrated, and badly bruised, but alert. The ankle appeared sprained rather than broken. The road to the county hospital had closed after a slide above Monarch Cut. "She needs warmth, fluids, observation, and no stairs," Mara said. "The clinic has animals stacked to the ceiling," Page replied over speakerphone, "and Willow should not be moved around more than necessary." Simone looked at Heath. He knew that look. "No," he said. Mara raised one eyebrow. "I haven't asked anything." "You're about to. Your house has a generator?" "Yes." "Ground floor bathroom?" "Yes." "Accessible road?" "Mostly." Bernadette adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Walker, I assure you, I am not contagious." "That wasn't my concern." "What was?" Heath considered the question. His house still had Laurel's scarf by the door, her mug in the cabinet, her side of the closet preserved by a man who pretended preservation was not another name for fear. He looked at Willow lying beside Bernadette's stretcher. The dog's eyes remained open despite exhaustion. "Space," he said at last. Bernadette nodded as though he had answered more honestly than expected. Simone documented the arrangement. Mara would check Bernadette again that evening. Paige would monitor Willow and come when the road allowed. No one was placing Bernadette in Heath's care without her consent. When Simone asked, Bernadette looked at Heath for several seconds. "Does your house contain tea?" "Technically." "Does it contain anything pretending to be tea?" "That depends on how demanding you are." "I taught music for 41 years. I am demanding by profession." "Then you'll be disappointed." "Good. Familiarity is restful." The decision was made. Before they left cabin 12, however, Willow refused to enter the rescue vehicle. She stood on the buried porch, facing the broken doorway. Paige's thermal blanket covered her back, but snow gathered along the silver line of her nose. Heath called her once. She did not move. Bernadette watched from the stretcher. "The towels," she said. Heath turned. "What towels?" "In the carriers. I used 4 different ones so I could watch which puppy was nursing well." He went back inside. The cabin was warmer now, but felt emptier without voices. Heath opened the carriers and collected 4 small towels, 1 blue, 1 cream, 1 green, and 1 patterned with faded yellow stars. Each held the faint animal warmth of a life that had been there and was gone. He placed them inside a canvas feed bag and carried it outside. Willow smelled the bag before he reached her. Her whole body changed. Her head rose. Her breath quickened. She pressed her muzzle against the canvas, drawing in the scent through the fabric. Then she looked at Heath. This time, he did not mistake the look for gratitude. It was a demand. "Do not lose these, too." He set the bag carefully inside the heated compartment. Willow climbed in after it and curled her body around the 4 folded towels. Only then did she allow the door to close. By morning, Heath's house no longer looked like a place designed to keep the world outside. Wet towels hung over the backs of chairs. A plastic basin occupied the floor near the stove. Paige's medical supplies covered one end of the kitchen counter, while evacuation forms, transport schedules, and handwritten notes spread across the table in uneven layers. Someone had moved Laurel's blue ceramic mug. Heath found it beside the sink, holding 3 pens and a thermometer. He stood looking at it longer than the situation deserved. Bernadette, seated at the table with her injured ankle elevated on a wooden stool, followed his gaze. "I needed something that wouldn't roll away." "There are jars?" "The jars are full of screws." "They're organized screws?" "Then the mug has finally found meaningful employment." Heath picked it up carefully and returned it to the cabinet. He gave Bernadette an empty coffee tin for the pens instead. She accepted the exchange without apology. The house had not been this crowded in years, although crowded was an ambitious word for 3 humans and 1 exhausted dog. It was the evidence of them that unsettled Heath. Damp boot marks, blankets folded incorrectly, a second coat hanging near the door. Presence had a way of spreading. Willow lay on a thick pad beside the stove, curled around the canvas bag containing the 4 small towels from cabin 12. She had eaten only a few bites of warmed food during the night. Each time she began to settle, a branch scraped the roof or a vehicle passed along the distant county road, and her head rose toward the front door. She was waiting for sounds that never came. Paige arrived shortly after sunrise, bringing cold air and a metal case of supplies into the kitchen. She removed her mustard parka and crouched beside Willow without greeting anyone first. The dog allowed the examination, though her eyes tracked Paige's hands. Temperature is still normal, Paige said. That's the good news. Heath leaned against the counter. And the part you say after that? She's producing milk, but she isn't nursing. One gland is firmer than I like. If she develops an infection, she'll get sick fast. Bernadette's fingers stopped tapping against her mug. What do we do? Warm compresses, fluids, small meals. Keep her quiet. Paige looked at Heath. And no one decides her determination is permission to march her through the mountains. I haven't marched anyone anywhere. You've been awake since 2, looking at road maps. That isn't marching. It's marching in stationary form. Heath glanced toward the maps stacked by the radio. Paige softened slightly. She needs her puppies, but she also needs to survive long enough to care for them when we find them. When Paige opened the canvas bag to check the towels, Willow lifted her head sharply. Paige paused and let the dog smell her wrist before touching anything. Only then did Willow settle again. Heath noticed the exchange. Paige had not demanded trust. She had asked for enough of it to complete one task. There were machines that worked the same way. Push too hard against resistance and something stripped. Give the pressure somewhere to move, and the whole system held. At 10, Simone arrived with 2 new people and enough folders to make Heath regret owning a table. The first was Ruth Delaney, a 61-year-old legal aid attorney who had officially retired and apparently treated retirement as an administrative suggestion. Her salt and pepper hair was cut in an uneven bob, one side tucked behind her ear, and dark red rectangular glasses rested low on her nose. She placed a worn navy case on the table and surveyed the room. Who has moved anything from its original folder? Heath looked at Bernadette. Bernadette looked at him. Ruth closed her eyes briefly. I appreciate the honesty of your silence. The second visitor was Darius Wynn, Juniper County's Emergency Management Coordinator. At 50, he had the sturdy build of a man accustomed to moving equipment himself when meetings failed to move it for him. He wore a gray quarter-zip sweater beneath a reflective rescue vest, and his closely shaved head bore a shallow crease where his winter cap had sat. Darius carried a folding whiteboard under one arm. No one likes the whiteboard, Simone said as he opened it. The whiteboard has never abandoned anyone. It has made people wish to be abandoned. Darius ignored her and divided the board into 4 columns: resident, animal, vehicle, destination. Heath understood the method immediately. Every person and every animal had to connect across the page. No assumptions, no vague arrows, no box marked complete unless someone at the other end had confirmed arrival. Ruth began with the Pine Lantern leases. The residences were not a nursing facility, despite the language used in several Silver Crown press releases. They were ordinary long-term rentals. Most tenants had once worked for the resort and had remained after retirement. Silver Crown can close unsafe housing, Ruth explained. What it cannot do is treat lawful tenants like furniture being moved before renovation. Bernadette looked down at her hands. Ruth turned a page. The avalanche assessment is real. So are the heating failures. That complicates the case. Because the casino gets to call it safety, Heath said. Because some of it is safety, Ruth corrected. Bad motives do not make every concern false. Good reasons do not excuse careless execution. Heath disliked answers that refused to become weapons. Those were usually the accurate ones. Darius began reading names from the resident list. Simone called shelters, motels, relatives, and 2 rural churches that had opened emergency rooms during the storm. Each confirmation received a green mark. Others received yellow. A few remained blank. The work was slow and ordinary. No sirens, no shattered doors, only hold music, dead numbers, and people saying they thought someone else had called. Willow slept through most of it. Around noon, the wind shifted. It came down the chimney in a hollow mechanical pulse, rising and falling at intervals. Heath's shoulders tightened before he could stop them. He fixed his eyes on the whiteboard. 4 columns, names, green marks. The sound grew louder inside the flue. For a moment, the kitchen seemed farther away than it was. Willow rose from her bedding. She did not come directly to him. Instead, she walked to the narrow space between Heath and the stove and sat facing the room. Her shoulder rested lightly against his shin. No drama, no command, just contact. Heath looked down at the silver line along her nose. "I know," he said quietly. Bernadette heard him but did not ask what he meant. The wind passed. Willow remained until Heath shifted his weight. Then she returned to the towels and lay down with her muzzle across the blue one. Darius uncapped his marker again. "Loretta Finch," he said. Bernadette looked up sharply. The name appeared midway down the list, beside the notation self-arranged. "No," she said. Darius checked the form. "You know her?" "She dealt cards at Silver Crown for 32 years, blackjack mostly. She could calculate 3 hands ahead and still remember who took sugar in their coffee." "Family nearby?" "One nephew in Arizona who sends birthday cards in April, regardless of when your birthday is." Simone searched the attached contact sheet. "No destination address." Bernadette leaned forward, forgetting her ankle until pain stopped her. "Loretta wouldn't leave without Buster." "Who is Buster?" Ruth asked. "Her dog, old spaniel mix. Bad heart, worse manners. She refused 2 senior housing offers last year because neither allowed pets." Darius wrote Buster beneath the animal column. There was no transport number beside either name. Heath looked at Simone. "We should check the motels." "We are checking them." "By phone." "That is generally how phones work. A person can fail to answer." "And a road can fail to remain on a mountain." Darius moved to the window. Beyond the glass, the eastern ridge shone beneath fresh snow. Beautiful, smooth, and unstable. "The state avalanche team has the eastern service route under a temporary closure," he said. "Wind loading increased overnight. No search vehicle goes through until they clear it." "Loretta may be sitting somewhere without heat." "She may," Darius said. "The puppies may be out there." "They may." Heath hated the calmness of the answer. He went to the mudroom and pulled his spruce canvas coat from its hook. Simone followed him. "Don't. I know the maintenance roads." "You know the roads that existed before last night." "My truck can handle the lower route." Darius appeared behind her. "The lower route crosses 2 run-out zones. I've crossed them in worse weather." "That doesn't make the slope safer. It means you have previously been lucky." Heath reached for his gloves. Bernadette spoke from the kitchen. "Mr. Walker." He kept his back to her. "You told me machines are honest," she said. He had mentioned it some time before dawn, when neither of them could sleep. "They are." "Then listen to the mountain as if it were one." Heath turned. Bernadette sat with both hands around her mug, her glasses reflecting the pale window light. "The route is closed," she continued. "The snowpack is unstable. 3 people who understand it better than we do have said so." "Waiting doesn't help Loretta." "No, but making them search for you as well will help her even less." Heath's jaw tightened. Bernadette's expression did not. "You cannot rescue someone by becoming the next rescue." The words were not loud. They carried no accusation. That made them harder to fight. Laurel had once found him replacing a section of roof during a thunderstorm. Water was already dripping through the hallway ceiling. She had stood below in an old yellow raincoat, looking up at him with equal parts fury and fear. "Not everything urgent requires you," she had shouted. At the time, he had taken it as criticism. Years later, he understood it had been a plea. Heath slowly set the gloves on the bench. Simone did not thank him. Darius did not look relieved. Their refusal to reward basic judgment irritated him almost as much as the road closure. He returned to the kitchen. "Continue," he said. The search moved indoors. Darius requested footage from Silver Crown's vehicle staging area. Simone contacted the fuel depot and obtained transaction records from the night of the evacuation. Ruth compared contractor invoices with scheduled routes. Hours passed. The whiteboard acquired lines, notes, and circles. The clean system became messy because the real one had been messier first. Near dusk, Darius's laptop chimed. He leaned closer to the screen. "What?" Heath asked. A transport truck assigned to Northline Animal Transit bought diesel at the East Maintenance Depot at 9:47 the night of the evacuation. Simone looked over his shoulder. "That depot is past the normal transfer point." "Exactly." Darius opened a grainy camera file forwarded by Silver Crown Security. The image showed a box truck entering the eastern snowmaking compound. A smaller utility van followed 6 minutes later. He advanced the footage frame by frame. In one image, a handler carried a covered animal crate toward the maintenance garage. Bernadette's fingers began tapping 4 beats against the table. Darius checked another report. A county animal control technician serviced a scanner at the snowmaking station yesterday morning. It logged a microchip from one of Pine Lantern's adult dogs. "Which dog?" Paige asked. "Male border collie. Name's Jasper." Bernadette nodded quickly. Jasper was transported in the same group as Willow's puppies. It was not proof, but it was the first line on the board that connected the missing animals to a real destination. Darius drew a red circle around East Snowmaking Station. "The route remains closed until daylight assessment," he said before Heath could speak. "We move when avalanche control clears us, not before." Heath looked at the circle, then at Willow. The dog had lifted her head. Perhaps she heard the change in their breathing. Perhaps she only sensed that the room had stopped being helpless. Heath did not reach for his coat again. Instead, he pulled a chair to the table and sat beside the whiteboard. "Show me the route," he said. Avalanche Control opened the Eastern Service route at 8:17 the next morning. Not opened exactly. Darius described it as conditional access, which meant the county believed the mountain might tolerate them if they behaved intelligently. Heath did not point out that mountains had never shown much interest in human qualifications. The storm had scrubbed itself from the sky during the night. Above Juniper Notch, the blue was pale and almost painfully clear. Snow covered every ridge, service road, and dark shoulder of pine in a brightness that made distance difficult to judge. The eastern snowmaking station sat 2 miles beyond the public ski runs, where artificial snow cannons stood among the trees like blunt iron animals. Their white plumes rose into the cold air and drifted across the slope, beautiful enough to make the place appear untouched. The tracks leading to the maintenance garage told a different story. Everett Doone drove the lead snowcat. At 58, he had spent most of his adult life operating machines in places where a mechanical mistake could become an obituary. He wore a faded orange shell over insulated overalls, and his gray beard had been cut short enough not to freeze against his collar. He spoke rarely while driving. When he did, everyone listened. "Stay in my track," Everett told Heath over the radio. "Not beside it, not near it, in it." "I understand tracks." "Good, then today will be restful." Heath followed in the county utility vehicle with Simone and Darius. Paige rode behind them in the heated veterinary transport, carrying oxygen, warm fluids, feeding tubes, and enough blankets to cover every mistake they might find. Willow remained at Heath's house with Bernadette and Mara. The decision had been Paige's, and she had made it final before Heath could suggest otherwise. Willow was still weak. Dragging a nursing mother into a high-altitude search site would satisfy emotion and violate nearly everything her body needed. Heath understood. Understanding did not make leaving her behind easier. At the station, Everett stopped beside a steel garage whose roof carried nearly 4 feet of snow. One bay door stood partly open. Electrical cables ran beneath it, disappearing toward a portable generator. Darius checked the structure and snow load before permitting anyone inside. The garage smelled of fuel, wet fur, disinfectant, and overheated rubber. Animal carriers lined the far wall. Some were empty. Others held shapes that lifted tired heads when the door opened. 2 terrier mixes, a long-haired cat, an elderly Labrador, and Jasper, the black and white border collie whose microchip had led them there. A man rose from a folding chair near the generator. He was younger than Heath expected, perhaps 37, with a narrow face, pale stubble, and brown hair flattened beneath a Northline transport cap. His reflective work coat was stained with food, grease, and something that looked like dried formula. His eyes had the bruised, unfocused quality of someone who had not slept. "Nolan Prentice?" Simone asked. The man nodded. "You should have answered your phone." "It died yesterday." "There are 6 chargers on that workbench." "I stopped checking it." Simone studied him but did not push yet. Paige was already moving among the carriers. She checked water, breathing, gums, bedding, and temperature with efficient hands. Then she stopped at a low plastic crate near the portable heater. The crate had been covered with 2 thermal blankets. Beneath them came a thin, irregular sound. Not barking. Smaller. Paige dropped to her knees. "Heath, bring the warming case." He carried it to her and lifted the nearest blanket. 3 German Shepherd puppies lay pressed together on a heated pad. They were so small that, for one disorienting moment, Heath could not connect them to Willow. Their bodies were dark, soft, and unfinished looking, as though nature had sent them into the world before adding the final details. One had a narrow white patch beneath the throat. Another was warmer in color, brown gold along the cheeks and legs. The third lay partly beneath the others. Its front paws were pale, almost white. Heath felt something inside his chest shift with enough force to resemble pain. Paige placed 2 fingers against the smallest puppy's ribs. Breathing, but shallow. She lifted it into a warmed towel. The puppy did not protest. That frightened Heath more than noise would have. The other 2 began squeaking when Paige separated them. Their tiny bodies searched blindly across the blanket. "Those 2 are cold but responsive," she said. "This one's dehydrated." "What do you need?" Heath asked. "Hold the warming case steady. No rubbing, no feeding until I assess body temperature." Heath obeyed. He did not reach for the puppy. He kept both hands on the case while Paige worked, placing warmed fluid beneath the loose skin and checking the mouth for signs of aspiration. The entire garage seemed to reduce itself to the rise and fall of one small rib cage. Nolan stood several yards away, twisting his cap. "I kept the heater running," he said. "I slept next to the generator so I'd hear if it quit." Paige did not look up. That helped. The words seemed to strike him harder than blame. Nolan sat down abruptly. Simone turned on her recorder. "Start at the beginning." Northline Animal Transit had been scheduled to send 3 heated vehicles to Pine Lantern. Only 2 arrived. One had already developed a warning light before reaching Silver Crown, but the dispatcher ordered the driver to continue because the evacuation window was closing. The larger truck carried most of the small animals, including Willow's 4 puppies. Willow herself had been placed in a van after sedation. At the transfer lot, the truck's heating system failed completely. Nolan called his supervisor. "He told me to wait for replacement transport," Nolan said. "Did replacement transport arrive?" Darius asked. "No." "How long did you wait?" 40 minutes. "And then?" Nolan looked toward the carriers. The animals were getting cold. So he made a decision. He divided the carriers between a utility van, a shuttle, and the snowmaking station, which had emergency power. He recorded part of the transfer on a paper list, but the snow soaked it before he could submit the update. "Why didn't you report the full redistribution later?" Simone asked. Nolan rubbed both hands over his face. "Because I was already written up twice. Once for refusing a transport load overweight. Once for missing a delivery window when a dog had a seizure." His voice hardened, not with anger, but shame. "I thought if the animals were alive, I could fix the paperwork afterward." Heath glanced at Darius's 4-column system in his memory. Resident, animal, vehicle, destination. Nolan had kept the animals alive. Then he had allowed them to disappear on paper. Both things were true. Paige finished stabilizing the smallest puppy and placed it inside the warming case. "Where is the fourth?" she asked. Nolan went still. He looked at the crate as if hoping another body might appear beneath the bedding. "There were 4 when we left Pine Lantern." "We know." "At the transfer lot, one was weaker. An older woman heard it crying in the shuttle." "Loretta Finch?" Simone asked. "I didn't know her name then." Nolan explained that Loretta had been sitting in the shuttle with an aging spaniel. When the heating failed, she asked to hold the weakest puppy inside her coat. Nolan allowed it while they shifted the carriers. Then the shuttle was ordered to continue toward temporary lodging. "The puppy went with her?" Heath asked. "I thought the driver would bring it back after dropping her off." "Did you confirm that?" Nolan's silence answered. Simone wrote something in her notebook. Darius did not. He looked at Nolan for a long moment, then said, "We'll need the shuttle route, driver's name, and every stop." Nolan nodded quickly. "I'll give you everything." Paige transferred the 3 puppies to the heated vehicle, keeping them together while the smallest remained in a separate warming compartment close enough to hear its siblings. Before closing the case, Heath looked once more at the pale front paws. The puppy stirred, its mouth opened in a silent, furious complaint. "Good," Paige murmured. "Stay offended." The return journey felt longer despite the clear road. Heath sat in the veterinary vehicle beside the secured carriers while Paige monitored temperature and breathing. The 2 stronger puppies squeaked intermittently, climbing over each other with the blind determination of creatures who did not yet know how nearly the world had misplaced them. The smallest remained quiet. Halfway down the mountain, it pushed one white paw against the side of the towel. Heath placed a finger against the transparent wall of the warming compartment. The paw remained there, not touching. Close enough. At Paige's clinic, Mara had prepared a private examination room away from the barking dogs and arriving rescue animals. Willow was brought in from Heath's house only after the room had been warmed and the puppies were stable enough for reunion. When Willow heard the first cry, she stopped in the corridor. Her whole body rose around the sound. She pulled once against the harness, then again. Heath walked beside her, matching her pace without restraining more than necessary. Paige opened the inner door. Willow entered. For several seconds she stood over the crate and did nothing. She sniffed the white-throated puppy, then the gold-brown one, then the smallest with pale feet. She checked them again. Her breath came fast. She licked each body with short, urgent strokes and circled twice before lowering herself onto the bedding. The puppies moved toward her warmth. The smallest needed Paige's help finding a place to nurse. When it finally latched, Willow lowered her head and closed her eyes. Heath expected relief to transform the room. Instead, something remained unsettled. Willow raised her head. She looked toward the clinic door, then back at the 3 puppies, then toward the door again. She knew. Heath could not explain how she counted them, whether by scent, sound, or some map written inside her body. But 3 was not 4. Bernadette arrived later with Mara, using a cane and wearing Heath's spare wool coat over her burgundy cardigan. She stood outside the examination room at first, watching Willow nurse. Heath found her there. "They're alive," she said. "3 of them." Bernadette nodded. The relief on her face carried no joy, only reduced grief. She held a folded document against her chest. "I need to show you something." They moved to Page's small office. Bernadette placed the paper on the desk. It was the animal transport authorization. At the bottom, beside the count of dogs, cats, and carriers, was her signature, Bernadette Cole. Heath had known she signed part of the transfer paperwork. Seeing the name in blue ink changed it. The signature looked calm. That offended him. "You said you didn't authorize them to separate Willow." "I didn't. But you authorized the transport." "Yes." "You signed without calling Page." "Yes." "You didn't keep the final manifest." "No." Each answer came without defense. Heath felt anger searching for a clean target. Bernadette stood in front of him. So did Nolan, in memory, sleeping beside a generator after hiding what he had done. So did the unseen manager who had cut vehicles, the dispatcher who had said continue, the county office that had accepted, self-arranged, without an address. Too many hands. No single throat for the anger to close around. "I thought you were trying to stop them," Heath said. "I was trying to help them leave safely." "You trusted them." "I did?" "That nearly killed Willow's puppies." Bernadette absorbed the words. "Yes." The simplicity of the answer left him nowhere comfortable to stand. She touched the edge of the form. "I was afraid of becoming the old woman everyone worked around, the one who asked too many questions while the storm got closer. So when something felt wrong, I let younger people with radios and printed schedules tell me it was under control." Her finger rested beside her signature. "I mistook being useful for being obedient." Heath looked through the office window at Willow and the puppies. He had wanted Bernadette to belong outside the failure, someone morally clean who had seen the danger and resisted it. It was easier to fight beside symbols. People were less convenient. Bernadette lifted the paper. "I am not asking you to excuse me." "What are you asking?" "That you don't waste time turning me into the only person responsible." Heath said nothing. After a while, Darius and Simone entered with an updated route sheet. They had identified the shuttle driver and were checking 3 possible motel stops. Heath looked at the map. The old instinct rose immediately. Choose the route, take the truck, move. He kept his hands at his sides. "What do you need from me?" he asked. Simone's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. Darius pointed to the maintenance roads around the western motel corridor. "You know which of these remain passable after plowing?" Heath stepped closer. "Yes." "Then start there." Behind the glass, Willow lifted her head again and stared toward the door. 3 puppies slept against her. One place beside them remained empty. The lakeside motor court had been built when travelers still believed a painted sign and a row of clean windows were enough to promise safety. By the time Heath's truck entered the lot, the sign had lost 3 letters, and the lake beyond the motel had frozen into a flat sheet of white. Afternoon sunlight struck the icicles beneath the awning, turning them clear and bright as hanging glass. The beauty made the place look warmer than it was. Darius had narrowed Loretta Finch's possible location to 3 motels along the western corridor. The first had never heard of her. The second had recorded her name but claimed she had canceled. At the third, a clerk with a wool blanket around his shoulders remembered an elderly woman arriving with a driver from Silver Crown. "Room 17, he said. Company card covered the first night. Declined after that. "When?" Simone asked. 2 days ago. "And you let her stay?" The clerk looked embarrassed. "Storm rate. Half the rooms are empty. I wasn't putting her outside." "Is there heat in 17? "There's supposed to be." That answer moved everyone faster. Heath crossed the walkway ahead of the others. The door to room 17 had been sealed along the bottom with a rolled bath towel. A handwritten note reading, "Please knock softly," had been taped above the handle. Simone knocked. Something small barked inside, followed by a deep cough. An elderly woman's voice called, "One moment." There was a scrape, then the slow turning of locks. Loretta Finch opened the door wearing a purple cardigan over 2 sweaters. At 79, she was narrow without appearing fragile, with a strong nose, silver hair cut bluntly beneath her ears, and dark eyes that seemed to calculate everyone before deciding whether they were worth the trouble. She held a butter knife in one hand. Heath glanced at it. Loretta followed his gaze. "The chain broke? The knife helps?" "No, but it discourages optimism." Simone showed her badge and introduced the group. At the name Bernadette Cole, Loretta's expression changed. "She sent you?" "She helped us identify the gap in the list," Darius said. Loretta looked beyond them into the snowy parking lot. "I was not a gap. I was in room 17. The room smelled of damp carpet, old radiator dust, and menthol ointment. A portable heater glowed near the bed, but its fan rotated with an uneven click. Each time the heating element brightened, the lamp above the nightstand dimmed. A rust-colored spaniel mix lay beneath a quilt on the mattress. His muzzle was white, his eyes cloudy, and every few breaths ended in a wet cough. "Buster," Loretta said. 12 years old, heart condition, suspicious of authority. Buster gave Simone a tired growl. "Good instincts," Simone said. On the floor beside the radiator stood a dresser drawer lined with towels. A hot water bottle had been wrapped in a pillowcase and placed along one side. In the center lay a German Shepherd puppy, dark-backed and small enough to fit between Heath's hands. The puppy's breathing was rapid. Its nose and lips showed a faint dried discharge. Paige was already kneeling. "How long have you had it?" she asked. "Since the evacuation." "Has it been feeding?" "Goat milk from the convenience store, diluted, a little at a time." Paige's face tightened, though not at Loretta. "Any choking?" "Once, I stopped and used a cloth instead of pouring." "You kept it warm." "I tried." "You did more than try." Loretta's shoulders lowered by less than an inch. Paige wrapped the puppy in a warmed veterinary blanket and listened to its chest. She checked the mouth, temperature, hydration, and reflexes, then looked toward Heath. "Possible aspiration pneumonia, mild for now, but it needs oxygen, antibiotics, and controlled feeding." "Can it travel?" "It has to." The puppy made a weak sound when Paige lifted it. From the bed, Buster coughed again. Mara Quill sat beside him, one hand resting lightly against his ribs, while she checked Loretta's pulse with the other. "Mrs. Finch, when did you last eat?" "This morning." "What?" "Crackers." "That is not a meal." "It was several crackers." Mara looked at the empty soup cup near the trash can. "And yesterday?" Loretta did not answer. Heath noticed the room's details then. A small suitcase remained packed beside the door. Buster's medication bottles had been arranged in exact rows. 2 slices of bread sat beneath an overturned plastic cup to keep them from drying out. Loretta had not settled here. She had been holding her place. Simone asked how she reached the motel. "A shuttle driver brought me." "Calvin Rusk?" "Yes, he carried my suitcase and Buster's bed. Nice man. Apologized for the cold as if he had invented winter." Calvin had been instructed to transport residents marked as self-arranged. He believed a housing coordinator would check them in and follow up. Loretta had been given a Silver Crown payment card, a voucher, and a phone number. The card failed the second morning. No one answered the number. "Why didn't you call the county?" Simone asked. Loretta glanced at Buster. "Because the last emergency shelter they offered me did not allow animals." "We could have found another option." "You could have," Loretta said. Or someone could have decided I was confused, taken me somewhere warm, and sent him somewhere else. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Buster lifted his head at the sound and leaned his muzzle against her hip. I have outlived 2 brothers, 1 husband, and most of the women I worked beside, Loretta continued. That dog still knows when I wake from a bad dream. I was not going to exchange him for central heating. Heath looked at her differently after that. On paper, Loretta had been difficult, self-arranged, refused placement, declined assistance. Inside room 17, those words became a woman sitting beside an old dog while the radiator failed. He had spent years distrusting emotional language because it blurred decisions. Now he saw how administrative language could do the same thing more cleanly. Darius inspected the motel voucher. The approval code is incomplete. Loretta gave him a flat look. It also does not produce heat. No, ma'am. What does it produce? Liability. That should keep someone warm. Despite the room, despite the sick animals, Heath almost smiled. Paige prepared the puppy for transport. When she asked how Loretta found it, the older woman pointed to the small travel crate near the bathroom. It was behind the last seat in the shuttle. I heard it after Calvin brought my bag inside. We both assumed it belonged to someone else in the motel. Did Calvin know you kept it? Simone asked. He went back to check the vehicle. By then, dispatch was calling him to another route. He said he would notify the animal team. He had tried. Then the message disappeared somewhere between urgency and responsibility. Calvin had not abandoned Loretta with malice. Nolan had not misplaced the puppy on purpose. The motel clerk had not wanted the heat to fail. Again, Heath found no single clean villain, only a long chain of people, each believing the next hand would close around what they released. Mara arranged a temporary room for Loretta at a county guest house where Buster could remain with her. Simone confirmed it in writing before Loretta agreed to pack. Both of us? Loretta asked. Both, Simone said. And no one decides otherwise after I arrive? Ruth Delaney, who had joined them by phone, instructed Simone to send a written accommodation statement with the transport order. Loretta read it twice. Only then did she put away the butter knife. At Paige's clinic, the 4th puppy went directly into an oxygen enclosure. Willow could hear it through the partition, but was not allowed close until Paige had stabilized its breathing. The 3 stronger puppies were nursing in the warmed room. Willow lay curved around them, visibly tired, but calmer than she had been. Then the 4th puppy cried. The sound was thin and congested, but Willow recognized it. She rose so quickly that one nursing puppy rolled onto its side. Heath steadied the bedding while Paige opened the inner gate. Willow approached the oxygen enclosure and pressed her nose against the clear panel. The puppy moved toward the shadow of her face. For several minutes they remained separated by less than an inch, and a wall neither could understand. Heath felt the urge to open the enclosure himself. He did not. Paige watched the monitor, adjusted the oxygen, and waited until the puppy's breathing became less frantic. "Now," she said. She transferred it to a shallow, warmed bed beside Willow, keeping an oxygen line near its muzzle. Willow inspected the puppy from nose to tail, then licked its face in slow, deliberate strokes. The puppy tried to nurse, but tired quickly. "We'll supplement," Paige said. "Small amounts, frequently." "I can take a shift," Heath said. Paige looked at him. "You understand this means every 2 hours?" "Yes." "You do not get points for looking grim while doing it?" "I wasn't aware points were available." "They aren't." That night, Willow and the puppies returned to Heath's house under Paige's instructions. The clinic had too many displaced animals and too little quiet space. Paige set up a warming area near his stove and left written feeding times taped to the cabinet. Bernadette remained in the guest room. Loretta and Buster were secure at the county guest house. For the first time since the storm began, everyone had an address. It still did not feel like an ending. The smallest puppy with white front paws needed bottle supplementation. Heath warmed the formula, tested it against the burn scar on his left hand, and held the puppy upright, as Paige had shown him. The puppy resisted with impressive anger. "Your survival strategy is poor manners," Heath told it. It pushed one pale paw against his thumb. After feeding, he placed it beside Willow. 10 minutes later, it had crawled away from the litter and fallen asleep against the toe of his winter boot. Bernadette watched from the doorway. "You could move your foot. It will wake." "You say that as if you have been taken hostage." "I have been." She left him there. The next morning, Silver Crown issued a public statement. Heath read it on his phone while the puppy slept against his boot. Due to extreme weather conditions, temporary logistical disruptions affected a limited number of Pine Lantern residents and companion animals. Silver Crown is cooperating fully with local partners and remains committed to the safety of our community as resort operations resume. Below the statement was a photograph of the casino lights glowing over fresh snow. Heath read the phrase, "limited number" twice. On the kitchen table lay proof of what those words erased. The incomplete lodging voucher, copies of transport forms, Paige's medical notes, and the names Darius had marked in yellow. He opened a social media page. His fingers moved over the screen. He could upload every document before Silver Crown reopened its gaming floor. Ruth arrived before he pressed the final button. She removed her camel-colored coat, saw the phone in his hand, and set her Navy case on the table. "No? You don't know what I'm doing. You're holding evidence with the facial expression of a man preparing to use a shovel indoors? They're calling this a disruption. They are controlling the narrative. So we correct it?" "We do," Ruth said. "Correctly." She explained what would happen if Heath posted everything without context. Nolan's name would spread first because his signature appeared on the vehicle sheet. Calvin would become the driver who abandoned an elderly woman. Bernadette's authorization would be copied without her explanation. Silver Crown's lawyers would call the records incomplete and possibly compromised. The public would choose the simplest villain before the real decision chain became visible. "You want speed," Ruth said. "They want confusion. Posting now gives both of you what you want and gives the residents nothing durable." Heath looked toward Willow. She lay with all 4 puppies against her. The sick one was not strong enough to nurse for long, so it rested beneath her chin between feedings. "What do you suggest?" "A public emergency meeting, recorded testimony, verified timelines, a temporary agreement with money, housing, animal care, and a stop on demolition." "That takes time." "Yes." People were already lost in the time it took everyone to do things properly. "No," Ruth said. "They were lost because no one did them properly." The distinction settled between them. Heath locked his phone. Outside, snow slid from the roof and struck the porch with a heavy thump. The white-footed puppy startled, crawled over Willow's foreleg, and made its unsteady way toward Heath's boot again. He bent and lifted it before it reached the cold floor. A rescue had an obvious moment when danger ended. This did not. The puppy would need another feeding in 40 minutes. Loretta needed housing beyond 3 nights. Buster needed medication. Pine Lantern's residents needed someone to confirm more than where they had been dropped. Heath looked at Ruth. "Tell me what the meeting needs." She opened her case. Willow lowered her head over the 4th puppy, staying awake even after the others had fallen asleep. The old Juniper Notch gondola station had not carried skiers in 12 years, but the building still remembered crowds. Its glass wall faced the valley, where sunlight spread across the snow in broad white sheets. Empty cable wheels hung above the main hall. Faded trail maps remained bolted near the entrance, their colored lines leading toward lifts that no longer moved. Ruth Delaney had chosen the place because it belonged to neither Silver Crown nor the county courthouse. No raised bench, she had said, no witness box. No one gets to pretend the furniture has already decided who is right. Rows of folding chairs faced 3 long tables arranged in an open square. A county recorder stood near the wall. 2 local reporters had been admitted under strict rules. No live broadcast, no photographing residents without consent, and no questions until the formal session ended. Heath arrived early and disliked how many people were already there. Former Pine Lantern residents sat together near the windows. Some held folders, others held leashes attached to animals lying beneath their chairs. Loretta Finch occupied the aisle seat with Buster wrapped in a plaid coat at her feet. The old dog's cough had improved, though every sound still made Loretta look down. Bernadette sat beside her in a navy dress and burgundy cardigan, one hand resting on her cane. The brass treble clef brooch at her shoulder caught the winter light. Nolan Prentice had chosen a chair in the rear corner. Without his transport jacket, he looked younger and less protected. Calvin Rusk sat 2 seats away, broad-handed and gray-mustached, turning his shuttle keys over and over in his palm. Neither man looked at the other. At the front table, Darius Wynn arranged a printed timeline beside the 4-column chart that had begun in Heath's kitchen. Mara Quill stacked medical welfare reports. Paige placed a smaller folder beside hers, marked with Willow's name and the identification numbers assigned to the puppies. Simone checked the room once, then stood near the side entrance where she could see everyone without appearing to guard them. Heath remained by the back wall. He had agreed to describe what he witnessed. Nothing more. Ruth found him there. "You're not hiding effectively," she said. "I'm standing." "You're standing in the architectural equivalent of a refusal." "I can hear from here." "You can also leave from here." Heath looked toward the exit. Ruth followed his gaze but did not tell him to move. "Stay where you need to," she said. "Just stay." Silver Crown's delegation entered 5 minutes before the meeting began. There were 2 attorneys, a regional insurance representative, and Colin Braddock, the resort's director of operations. Colin was 52, compact and broad through the shoulders, wearing a navy blazer over a white shirt without a tie. His dark blonde hair had gone silver above the ears, and exhaustion had drawn shadows beneath his steel blue eyes. His hands did not match the rest of him. They were large, rough across the knuckles, and marked by old calluses. Heath noticed Colin touch the carpenter's pencil in his breast pocket before sitting down. The gesture was small, familiar. A man reaching for the version of himself he trusted more. Ruth opened the meeting without ceremony. "This is an emergency fact-finding session," she said. "It is not a criminal trial, a public relations event, or a contest to identify one person capable of carrying everyone else's blame." One of Silver Crown's attorneys shifted. Ruth looked over her glasses. "If that description disappoints anyone, the exits remain functional." No one moved. Darius presented the timeline first. His voice remained even as he described the failures. 3 vehicles promised, 2 supplied, 1 heating system reported unstable before departure. Residents marked self-arranged without verified destinations. Animal carriers redistributed without updating the central list. No system linking each person and animal to a confirmed arrival. He placed the original evacuation checklist beside the reconstructed chart. The official list was clean. The reconstructed one was dense with colored marks, arrows, corrected times, and handwritten notes. "This," Darius said, touching the official page, "records tasks." Then he touched the second. "This records outcomes." The distinctions stayed in the room. Mara followed with the human consequences. She did not dramatize them. That made the facts harder to dismiss. One resident had gone 36 hours without blood pressure medication. Another had been placed in a motel room, accessible only by exterior stairs. Loretta had spent 2 nights with unreliable heat because her payment authorization stopped after the first night. Most residents survived the transfer without lasting physical injury, Mara said. That should not be confused with an adequate plan. Page described Willow's separation from her newborn litter, the risk of infection to the mother, and the condition of the 4th puppy. The puppy is improving, she said. That improvement required oxygen, antibiotics, controlled feeding, and continuous monitoring. It does not retroactively make the transport acceptable. The Silver Crown attorney asked whether weather had been the primary cause. Weather increased the consequences, Page replied. It did not separate the dog from her litter or fail to update the manifest. Simone then summarized the witness statements. She did not accuse Nolan when she read his account of dividing the carriers after the truck's heater failed. She did not defend him either. Nolan stood when Ruth called his name. His hands shook enough to rattle the paper he carried. I knew I was supposed to report every transfer, he said. I also knew the animals were getting colder while dispatch told me to wait. Why didn't you file the corrected locations afterward? Ruth asked. Nolan looked toward the floor. Because I thought they'd fire me before anyone checked whether the animals were safe. Were you afraid? Yes. Did that fear contribute to animals and records becoming separated? Yes. He sat down without asking to be understood. Calvin spoke next. He confirmed that he had delivered Loretta and Buster to the motel, carried their belongings inside, and assumed a housing coordinator would follow. Did you confirm anyone had accepted responsibility for her? Ruth asked. No. Why not? Dispatch sent me back for another load. Loretta watched him from the front row. Calvin turned toward her. I thought someone else was coming. That sentence has had a busy week, Loretta said. A few people laughed, but Calvin did not. I'm sorry, he said. Loretta's expression did not soften. I believe you are. It was neither forgiveness nor rejection. It was room left for later. Bernadette came forward with her signed transport authorization. She did not use her cane at the table, though Heath could see the effort it cost her to stand evenly. She explained that she had verified the original animal count but had not contacted Page before permitting transport. She had accepted verbal assurances that Willow and the puppies would reach the same facility. I knew the process felt rushed, Bernadette said. I remained quiet because I did not want to be treated as an elderly volunteer who was making trouble. Ruth asked, What do you believe now? Bernadette looked toward the residents. That silence is not cooperation merely because it makes a meeting shorter. Near the back, someone murmured agreement. No one applauded. That seemed right. When Colin Braddock's turn came, he did not begin with an apology. He began with numbers. Silver Crown employed more than 400 people during the winter season. The parent company had warned that continued losses could close the resort. A proposed expansion tied to the winter poker circuit was expected to stabilize revenue and protect jobs. Pine Lantern's heating system had failed multiple inspections. The avalanche assessment had identified genuine risk. Moving residents before the next major storm had seemed necessary. All of that may be true, Ruth said. Who verified the destinations? Colin's jaw tightened. The relocation contractor was responsible for transport. That was not my question. He touched his left cuff, smoothing it once. The operations office received completion reports. Who verified them? No one independently. The answer appeared to age him. Colin explained that he had grown up in Pine Lantern. His father maintained the old lifts and boilers. Their cabin had stood where the proposed North Tower would eventually rise. "I did not consider those residents disposable," he said. Loretta spoke from her chair. "People rarely do while disposing of them." The words brought a silence no attorney could manage. Colin looked at her. "No," he said. "I suppose they don't." The meeting paused for 10 minutes. Heath went outside. The gondola platform overlooked the White Valley. Wind moved powder along the railing in thin silver streams. Behind the glass, people gathered around coffee urns and document boxes, continuing the same difficult conversations in smaller groups. Colin stepped onto the platform a moment later. He did not approach Heath immediately. "My father taught me to rebuild gearboxes in that station," he said, nodding toward the old machinery overhead. Heath kept his eyes on the valley. "Then you knew what happens when one part carries too much load." "I knew." "And you did it anyway." Colin accepted that without argument. "I thought I was keeping the whole place running." Heath looked at him then. For a moment, Colin's blazer disappeared. Heath saw a maintenance worker's son holding a carpenter's pencil, measuring every problem by what could be repaired before the next shift. It did not excuse him. It made him harder to hate cleanly. When the meeting resumed, Colin's attorney presented Silver Crown's master evacuation report. Each category had been marked complete. Residents relocated, animals transferred, property secured. Heath stared at the page. The boxes were tidy, the dates aligned. Every line ended where someone wanted it to. Ruth called his name. Heath had prepared 3 sentences. He walked to the table and forgot all of them. He described finding Willow beneath the shuttle. He described Cabin 12, Room 17, the empty carriers, and the 4th puppy struggling inside an oxygen enclosure. Then Colin said quietly, "The reports available to me showed that every relocation item had been completed." Heath looked at the report. Laurel's voice returned, not as a ghost, only as memory sharpened by regret. "You can replace every lock in this house, Heath. You still don't know how to open a door." He rested both hands on the table. "My wife used to say I could repair anything that came with screws," he began. The room waited. She was not complimenting me. His throat tightened. He let the silence remain rather than filling it with something false. "When she got sick, I fixed the furnace, the porch, the cabinets. Anything with a beginning, a procedure, and a point where I could say it was done." He glanced at the completion report. "Pain doesn't give you that, neither do people." Another pause. "A list can say a woman was housed while she sits beside a failing heater. It can say a cabin was secured while someone is freezing inside it. It can say animals were transferred while a mother dog is under a shuttle looking for 4 newborns." He looked at Colin. "I don't think you ordered that. I think you built a system where no one had to see it." Heath sat down before the words could turn into a speech. Ruth closed her pen. That small click marked the end of testimony. The negotiations lasted 4 hours. No one emerged satisfied. That, Ruth later said, was how they knew the agreement might be real. Silver Crown committed to pay for 90 days of temporary housing. Demolition at Pine Lantern would stop while leases and relocation duties were reviewed. The company would fund an escrow account for animal care and resident support. Cabin 12 would be transferred to county use for the rest of winter. Darius obtained approval for a live verification system connecting each resident, animal, vehicle, and receiving location. Ruth secured a clause protecting employees who reported safety failures in good faith. Mara insisted on written accommodation for residents with companion animals. Colin signed last. His carpenter's pencil remained untouched in his pocket. He used Ruth's black pen. The agreement did not restore Pine Lantern. It did not promise the casino would never expand. It did not erase Bernadette's signature, Nolan's silence, Calvin's assumption, or the county's missing safeguards. It created time. For the moment, time was the thing everyone had nearly run out of. After most people left, Paige arrived with Willow. The puppies remained under supervision at Heath's house. Willow had been restless, and Paige allowed a short visit after confirming her condition was stable. The German shepherd stepped onto the old platform beside Heath. Her repaired burgundy collar showed against her black and gold coat. Wind rushed through the unused cable housing. The sound deepened, chopped, and struck a place in Heath that did not care how many years had passed. His fingers went cold. Willow moved beneath his lowered hand. She pressed her silver-marked brow into his palm. He did not tell himself the sound was harmless. He did not pretend he was cured. He stood with one hand on the dog while the wind passed through the station and continued down the mountain. Behind them, through the glass, Ruth stacked the signed pages. No one had won, but no one had been allowed to disappear. Cabin 12 did not become a sanctuary because someone painted a sign above the door. For the first 3 weeks, it remained what it had always been, an aging service cabin with uneven floors, tired pipes, and a roof that leaked whenever snow melted faster than it could drain. Heath preferred that honesty. A building should admit what was wrong with it. He replaced the damaged section of a roof first, working beneath a winter sun so bright it turned the snowfields blue at their edges. Nolan Prentice helped remove the rotted boards. He carried lumber without complaint and asked before touching any tool that did not belong to him. They did not discuss the transport failure. Not at first. Below them, Calvin Rusk used the old shuttle to deliver insulation, pet food, and folding cots. He had volunteered for weekend routes after Silver Crown placed him on paid administrative leave during the review. Loretta Finch supervised from the porch with Buster wrapped in a plaid coat beside her. "You missed a box," she called as Calvin closed the rear doors. Calvin looked inside. "I did not." "The blue one. That contains paper towels." "Paper towels have suffered enough during this emergency." Calvin retrieved the box. Loretta nodded once. It was not forgiveness, but it was more useful than silence. Inside the cabin, Paige divided the former kennel room into a basic isolation area and a recovery space. She taped sanitation procedures beside the sink and made everyone sign a cleaning schedule. Bernadette objected to the word schedule. "I have managed animals for years without a chart telling me when to wash my hands." "That," Paige replied, "is why the chart also tells everyone else." Bernadette adjusted her green-framed glasses and signed. After the meeting at the gondola station, Silver Crown began paying her a small coordination stipend from the emergency fund. The amount embarrassed her at first. Then Ruth Delaney told her that unpaid labor was not morally superior merely because a woman had been performing it for years. Bernadette stopped objecting after that. She became stricter with written confirmations. Every arriving animal received a card with a name, owner, medication, feeding schedule, transport vehicle, and confirmed destination. If someone said another person had already checked something, Bernadette handed them a pen. Then writing it down should be easy. Mara arranged a quiet corner near the front room for older owners waiting on housing or transport. It held 2 padded chairs, a kettle, spare blankets, and a low table where Buster could rest without jumping. Darius mounted a whiteboard on the wall. Resident, animal, vehicle, destination. No entry could be erased until the person or receiving facility at the far end confirmed arrival. The system was not beautiful. It worked. Colin Braddock came on the 4th Saturday wearing a brown work jacket instead of his Silver Crown vest. No photographer followed him. No company vehicle waited outside. He brought replacement windows and spent 6 hours helping Heath install them. Neither man mentioned the gondola meeting until late afternoon when one stubborn frame refused to sit square. "My father would have blamed the wall," Colin said. "Was the wall wrong?" "Usually." Heath checked the opening with his level. "Your cut is short." Colin examined the board. "It's an 1/8. "It's still short." "You enjoy this?" "A little." Colin cut another piece. No one at Pine Lantern forgave him because he showed up with lumber. Some residents refused to speak to him. Loretta thanked him for the windows and then gave him a written list of motel expenses. He accepted both. That, Heath thought, was closer to accountability than applause would have been. Willow and the 4 puppies spent most days in cabin 12 once Paige approved the heating and sanitation. At night, Heath often brought them back to his house so the weakest puppy could be monitored without the noise of arriving animals. The white-footed pup recovered slowly. His breathing cleared, but he remained smaller than the others and tired more easily. Every 2 hours, Heath warmed formula, tested it against the inside of his wrist, and held the puppy upright while it ate. The puppy responded to careful treatment by attacking the bottle as if it had insulted his family. "You are 6 pounds of poor judgment," Heath told him one night. The puppy pushed both pale paws against Heath's thumb. Willow watched from the bedding. She no longer tensed every time Heath lifted one of her young. Trust had not arrived as a single decision. It had accumulated through repeated feedings, clean blankets, and hands that always returned what they picked up. When the bottle was empty, Heath set the puppy beside her. 10 minutes later, it crossed the rug and fell asleep on his boot. By the 3rd week, Bernadette had begun calling it the sock-footed inspector. Heath refused to encourage the name. He also stopped moving his boots. Willow's legal status required more patience than anyone enjoyed. Her former owner, Edna Vale, had lived at Pine Lantern until her death the previous autumn. Edna had arranged for a small regional rescue organization to manage Willow's placement, but the paperwork remained incomplete when Willow became pregnant. The rescue approved Heath as a temporary foster after Paige submitted a home inspection and health plan. Heath signed the forms at his kitchen table. "This does not mean permanent," he said. Paige looked at Willow asleep beneath his chair. "Of course not." "Foster placement." "Certainly." Bernadette hid a smile inside her tea. After the puppies were weaned, Willow was free to sleep at cabin 12 or return home with Heath. On the first evening, he left the cabin door open and walked toward his truck without calling her. Willow stood on the porch. Behind her, Bernadette sorted intake cards. Loretta brushed Buster near the stove. The cabin was warm, occupied, and familiar. Heath reached the truck. Willow descended the steps and followed him. The next night, she did the same. By the end of the week, no one described it as a decision anymore. 2 months passed before Paige permitted the first adoption. The white-throated male went to a retired couple who had owned working shepherds for 30 years and possessed more fenced land than common sense. Loretta fostered the gold-brown female as a companion for Buster, who regarded the puppy with the exhausted resignation of an old professor assigned an energetic student. The darker male entered a long-term training program connected to an adult veterans rehabilitation center. Paige repeatedly corrected anyone who called him a service dog before he had completed even 1 week of assessment. "He is currently a puppy with employment prospects," she said. The white-footed pup remained with Heath, only temporarily. Heath maintained this position until the puppy chewed the lace from his left boot, slept inside his field jacket, and began answering whenever Bernadette called him Milo. One evening, Heath said the name without thinking. Milo turned immediately and ran into a chair. Bernadette looked up from her cards. "You named him." "I tested a sound." He responded. He collided with furniture. An enthusiastic response. A small brass tag reading Milo appeared on the puppy's collar the following morning. Heath claimed Paige had ordered it. Paige denied everything. Not all changes came through animals. One afternoon, Paige found Heath outside cabin 12 when wind moved through the idle snowmaking towers. The hollow rhythm stiffened his shoulders before he turned away from it. She did not ask what he remembered. Instead, she handed him an address. Graham Sutter needs someone to look at a generator." "Who is Graham Sutter?" "Former rescue aviation mechanic, runs a weekly support group for veterans in the old fire annex." "I don't attend groups." "I said his generator is failing." Heath looked at the address. "You're dishonest for a medical professional." "I work with patients who bite." Graham Sutter was 53, barrel-chested, and missing the tip of his left little finger. He greeted Heath beside a generator that was, in fact, making an ugly grinding noise. They spent an hour replacing a bearing. When the machine ran smoothly, Graham poured 2 cups of coffee and carried them into the annex, where 5 other men and women sat around a scarred table. Heath remained long enough to finish the cup. The next week, Graham called about a voltage fluctuation that did not exist. Heath went anyway. He stayed for coffee again. By the final Sunday of Advent, snow had softened the hard edges of Juniper Notch. Cabin 12 stood lit among the pines, its repaired windows glowing gold. The long-term agreement was still under negotiation, but Ruth believed the county would secure the property before spring. That evening, everyone gathered at Heath's house. Paige brought soup in a dented steel pot. Mara arrived with 2 loaves of bread. Simone carried revised emergency forms and was informed by Loretta that paperwork was not food. Ruth brought the latest draft of the Cabin 12 lease in her worn Navy case. Calvin and Nolan came later, each uncertain whether they had been invited or assigned. Colin did not attend. He was working the overnight shift at Silver Crown after restoring several staff positions cut before the evacuation. Bernadette arrived last. She carried a plain white candle. "At the old pet circle," she explained, "we lit one each Advent for animals still waiting for a place to belong." Heath looked at the candle. Laurel had loved Advent lights. She used to place them along the kitchen windows, small flames reflected against the dark glass. After her death, Heath packed the candles into a wooden box and stored them beneath winter blankets. He had not opened it since. No one in the room knew that. He went to the hall closet and returned with an old storm lantern made of glass and darkened brass. It had belonged to Laurel. Bernadette did not ask. Heath placed the candle inside the lantern and set it on the stone ledge beside the stove, beyond Milo's reach. When Bernadette lit it, the flame appeared twice, once within the glass and again in the black window behind it. For a while, everyone ate. The table that had once held one plate now barely held the bowls, bread, documents, and Bernadette's tin of animal tags. Simone argued with Ruth about a clause in the transport policy. Loretta fed Buster a piece of bread after insisting she never gave him table food. Willow lay beneath the table with her head across Heath's boot. Milo slept on the other one. There was no speech. No one said the house felt different. They were too busy making it so. After the guests left, Bernadette paused beside the lantern. "You can put it out," she said. "Tradition does not require burning the house down." "I know." She studied him, then nodded and closed the door behind her. Heath checked the lantern's vents, moved it farther onto the stone, and added wood to the stove. Then he sat at the table to revise the overnight duty list for Cabin 12. Willow slept near his chair. Milo remained curled around the old bootlace he had stolen weeks earlier. Sometime before dawn, Heath fell asleep with his head against the chair back. When he woke, gray morning filled the windows. The candle had burned down to a small pool of wax. Its flame was no larger than a held breath, protected behind the glass. Outside, fresh snow covered the path between his house and the road leading toward Cabin 12. Years ago, Heath had kept that path clear so he could leave quickly. He put on his coat, took the shovel from the porch, and stepped into the quiet morning. Willow followed. Milo tumbled after her, disappeared chest-deep into the first drift, and emerged looking personally betrayed by winter. Heath lifted him free and set him in the track behind Willow. Then he began clearing the path. Not toward the highway, toward the cabin lights waiting through the trees. Sometimes the hardest kind of courage is not rushing in to be the hero. It is staying long enough to listen, admit where we failed, and help build something better than before. Heath, Willow, and the people of Juniper Notch remind us that real kindness is more than one brave moment. It is responsibility repeated when no one is watching. Have you ever seen a small act of accountability change someone's life? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories of loyalty, grace, and quiet courage. May God give you wisdom to do what is right and the strength to remain when others need you most.